hello, and welcome to the show. It is June 22nd, 2025, Season 4, Episode 23. This is Skeptic Generation. I'm Eric Murphy, and we need to talk. Joining me today is, actually, we've got some news. So how about, Atticus, why don't you join me, and let's talk about this. Hey, Atticus, how's it going?
Hi, Eric. I'm doing well. How are you?
It's been a hell of a week, but before we get into that, I teased some exciting news, and so I really kind of want to dive into that first.
Oh,
Hey, Atticus,
yes.
welcome to your regular guest spot every month on Skeptic Generation. Yay! I I don't know. I think that your takes, the way that you're able to recall information and engage in a genuinely charitable and also, a very real way. I think is exactly what I want for the show. And so getting to have you on and just getting to hang out with a friend, is really nice. And so I'm really glad you're here, and I'm glad that people are going to get to see you once a month. So when is your regular slot?
My regular slot is the third Sunday of every month. So I'll be here every third Sunday, hanging out with y'all lovely folk, and
Yeah.
also in the after show.
Yay! So I know people might be wondering about Dean. Dean was originally going to be hopping into the third Sunday slot. Dean is still a dear friend, love him to death, and also, sometimes life comes up and has got other plans for you. And I think that he is taking care of what he needs to take care of, and I'll be excited to have him on. But him moving opened up this space for you, and I'm super fucking excited about that. So, we're really, really good. We've got lots to talk about. It's been a hell of a week. But first, before I do, let me put out the phone number. That way we can start getting some callers. Here we go. I know that numbers are low. Numbers are usually low after there's been a week without a show. So we may just be hanging out and talking for a bit. But if we do have people who want to call in, the phone number is 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is on the line and ready to talk to you. And yes, as of today, June 22nd, 2025, there was a lot of international news that has come out in the last 24 hours. I wanted to talk about propaganda, but because it's my show, I want to talk about something else first. So I had a grandparent pass just a few days ago. I think it's 3 days ago now. Not the first time. But I do just want to take a minute. Atticus, I know that and I've said this on the show before, but my name was not. I'm not originally Eric Murphy. I was born with a very different last name. I was Eric Raymond Townend, and I changed my name as an adult to reflect the influences in my life and what was important. I took the last name Murphy for the adoptive family that played a large part in raising me. And I chose Daniel as my middle name because that is from my birth mom's side of the family. The best man that I knew was my grandpa. And so 3 days ago, Daniel Moroness passed away. It's interesting. Like, we talk about immigration and things and I look at my grandpa, and dude was the American dream. I guess I know I hadn't told you about this, but I don't know if I told very many people. My grandpa came to the United States when he was 13 years old from Guadalajara, Mexico. And when he was 13, I believe this was in the 50s, 50s, 60s, 50s, I think. He got a job in a macaroni factory in Los Angeles at 13 years old. Never went back to school. And worked from then on. Dude worked construction, very stereotypical, along with a lot of my family on that side. And he also never missed an opportunity to say, I love you. He never got affected by that kind of toxic masculinity. And he never hesitated to do the right thing. And while I have lots and lots of stories, I think that I'm really, really proud that I got to have him when I did. And so, I don't know, not talking about that feels weird to me. So I just wanted to, put that out there. Hell, when I started my first podcast, it was called The Atheist Podcast because no other show had taken that yet. And I put out merch. And I remember a few weeks after that podcast went out, I got a picture from my family in Arizona. My grandpa was wearing my Atheist Podcast shirt just because he wanted to support me. Like just genuinely good people. So yeah, I am going to be I may wind up missing an episode in August or September, depending on when we're going to have a service. So just heads up, I'll notify on the channel. But all right, that aside, where should we start? Do we talk about the bombing in Iran last night, or do we talk about propaganda? I don't even know where to start. Again, this is one of the things I appreciate having you on for, is because we can talk about this shit. But what's on your mind?
I'm mostly thinking about how, so when 9/11 happened, I was 6. And then there was the rumblings of the stirs of war in the Middle East kind of happening. And people like to say that, oh, kids don't really pay attention, they don't know much, but kids hear and see everything. And I remember having nightmares when I was 7.5, maybe 8, about oh, war is going to happen, therefore bombs will come and land on my house and my family is in danger. And those are things that I worried about as a child.
Yeah.
And so since that age until 2022, the United States was involved in some sort of military conflict in the Middle East. And so it was my entire life growing up with the shadows of war, or family members being sent off to the Middle East to fight in a war that they didn't start. And I just think it's interesting that war was started by someone of a particular political party. And we ended the Iraq War under a member of a different political party, and an Iranian war starting with a member of the same political party that started the first two.
Right?
So it's
yeah, fucking Republicans. Jesus Christ. It's interesting. So you were 6.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was a freshman in high school.
Yeah, I was in kindergarten when the towers fell. I came home and it was just that on repeat on the news, watching 3,000 people die as a 6-year-old. So I mean, it does something to you. Explains the millennial Gen Z bridge generation.
I was a freshman in high school, and I remember all of the upperclassmen. There were a lot of people, boys who were on my wrestling team and stuff, who were very excited to join the military immediately after high school. There was a big group of my peers who went to go serve immediately afterward. So that was weird.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be weird.
Yeah. What is interesting to me is I don't think we're going to have that kind of big nationalistic push this time.
No, I don't think so either. I think because a lot of the So for those who don't know my background, political science is my field of study. It's I don't have a degree, I can't afford a college degree, but whenever I do go to college and can afford college classes, I'm working toward that degree. I've been involved in the political venue for the better part of a decade. I've worked in electoral politics, locally, nationally, and just it's my hyperfixation because politics is always changing, so there's always something to chew on. But the reason why a lot of MAGA folks vote for Donald Trump is because they like the norm breaking. They like the institutional collapse. They view as institution and norms as kind of what has a stranglehold on the ability to govern effectively. So with him kind of going, no, I'm not going to go to war with Iran during the 2024 election, that being a big draw to a lot of anti-war folk, especially on the right. And him doing this, I've seen just in passing. This is all anecdotal, but I've seen in passing a lot of really diehard MAGAs starting to do a hip check and be like, no, we're not doing this again. I don't want to do this again. And nobody wants this war. So him trying to like preemptively start a war to avoid a war, I don't know. His reasoning, that's been his reasoning. I only got involved to stop a war. And it's like, I think his coalition will his coalition isn't going to last if these are the things he's doing. And it will just embolden the opposition even more.
Is it conspiracy thinking on my end to go, the timing of this when it comes to the riots in LA and the lack of war powers that Trump seems to be lamenting, all of a sudden having that access. Is that conspiratorial on my end?
I don't think it's conspiratorial.
No?
I don't think it's conspiratorial, but I also don't think I don't think that's what the line of thinking was, but I also don't think that wasn't the opportunistic thing to do. I don't think he was like, here, let me get into Iran to stop from my brown shirts from kidnapping my citizens off the street. Let me do that. I don't think it was that direct, but I think he saw the opportunity to look like a strong man, and he wants to take that opportunity because that's what he aspires to.
Fair enough.
It just happened to coincide with a really bad time for him domestically.
Fair enough. I did see somebody in the chat saying, don't call something that happened on a single block in LA the LA riots. I said riots happening in LA. If it happened on a single block, then fair enough. But also, I was a kid living in Southern California during the LA riots. And like, I get it. So hold off on the sanctimoniousness of that. Chill. Yeah. I think that I don't want to downplay protests and riots because I'm personally totally fine with it. And I think that downplaying it before things have played out feels a little, what's the word? Premature. Mm-hmm. So there's still hope. But okay. All right. Fair enough. Let's see. So I don't know. We can get in a little further on this, or we can talk about propaganda. What are you feeling?
I think it's a good opportunity to segue to propaganda.
Yeah.
Given the fact that Vice President Vance was on a new show this morning talking about how this time it's going to be different because this time there's a smart person in charge.
Yeah.
And surely doing the same thing again will yield different results.
Yeah. Okay, then. So I had this thought a few weeks ago, and I've been waiting to run it by you. And the fact that you're now a regular on the show means that I can totally save it for this. But I've shifted on propaganda, and I know that I have had some pretty strong conversations and arguments sometimes with you about what is and isn't propaganda, and what is and isn't intentional, and how we should and shouldn't view and consume media. Mm-hmm. And I think that My definition of propaganda was similar to that definition of porn. Who was the congressperson who said, "It's I'll know it when I see it"?
I think it was a Supreme Court justice.
Was it?
I can't. I think it was a Supreme Court justice. I can't give you the definition, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah,
It was when the case with the case that legalized pornography under the First Amendment.
right. And so I felt that way about propaganda, right? Propaganda needed to be very, very specific. It needed to be, Uncle Sam wants you to join the
Yeah.
military, buy war bonds, right? It was, Cold War. Let's talk about the communist threat. Let's, loose lips sink ships. It was very specific, very targeted. Rosie the Riveter was propaganda, and hearing people talk about normal media as propaganda felt weird, and I had a really big pushback against it. But I've shifted on that view, and I wanted to get your opinion on it so that I'm not in an echo chamber here. And also for people who are watching, if you disagree, call in.
Yes.
But I think that there are two real types of propaganda. There's the active and the passive. There's the propaganda that seeks to teach and to advocate for its own views, which is that very direct, I want you to join the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other is this more subtle conversation about what societal norms are and what they ought to be. And this argument over the status quo and this continuous negotiation with ourselves and each other about the status quo. So thinking about it, I think that if I were to pull somebody from, North Korea and bring them to the United States and pick a TV show, they would say, "Oh, that's some interesting propaganda," even if it's just something normal. It could be Friends. I don't know. Could be, it could be Big Bang Theory. It could be, or whatever, right? It could be Bob's Burgers. It would not seem like propaganda to us, but to them, what they're seeing is the normalization of a type of worldview that can show a happy kind of life under this Western capitalist worldview. And so they would view what we view as normal as propaganda, because even though it's not advocating that one ought to live in a, democratic Western, whatever society, however we want to call ourselves, because of that stark contrast in norms, they would view it that way. And I think that's what most media does. We're not necessarily having a conversation about, supporting a government, but we are continuously negotiating our norms. Mm-hmm. And I think that the slippery slope on that is I'm kind of defining everything as propaganda. And so I wanted to get your take on it and see what you thought.
I'm not sure if I would say everything is propaganda, but I do think everything is branding and everything is advertising, which may not be the same thing, but could be in the right circumstances. Yeah. That sounds a little fence-sitting, so let me kind of elaborate. Since we were talking about the ongoing conversation that we as a society are constantly having, either around norms or politics or social agreements. So before 2020, it was fine to come into work if you had a cold because you were just going to power through it.
Oh, it was you were a good worker if you came in and pushed through. Yeah.
Oh, can you do your job? Then you should be here in your job, and people would strive to do that. And now it's, oh, you're in the office and you have a cold? Okay, that's a choice. Or you have a cold, where's your mask? You need to mask up to keep other people kind of protected in the office if you're going to be in the office. So that's a conversation that has shifted, and all of its branding of, so if you want to be considered considerate and mindful and tolerant and accepting of others in other spaces, and you would want to mask up. Or if you go a little further back, 5 years, during the 2020 primary, there was an active conversation about whether crossing the border should be decriminalized. That was a legitimate conversation happening within the Democratic Party. And that's something that I find so fascinating, because we have drifted so far, much further to the right, because that's just how the general conversation amongst people in this country has gone. So it is always a negotiation. It's always branding. It's always advertising. And most of the way that you can communicate your branding and advertising is through propaganda. So I think they're all kind of connected in this wonderful web that we weave.
Well, I think that you're implying some nuance that I don't think everybody has, because I think that and this is nuance that I have feel like I've only recently truly like internalized, because I've always viewed propaganda as something bad. Right. Propaganda is kind of manipulating your emotions, right? It is pushing you to see the world in the way that, that propaganda is potentially encouraging. And, the goal of that propaganda would be for you to internalize and reset your values to whatever the norms are that are being perpetuated by that propaganda. Someone in the chat was saying, what is the definition? That's kind of what I'm seeking to define right now, right? That it's not just a blatant, join the military. It's not just a blatant, communism equals bad kind of thing. But that's only half of it. That there's the active piece of it. And then there's the piece that is this continuous conversation that we're having amongst ourselves about what normal is. Your example about wearing masks is an interesting one, because I mean, I lived in Texas, after COVID. Even in Texas, if you worked at a regular office environment and you were sick, it was rude not to wear a mask.
Right.
Even if you were kind of conservative, you still knew that people would view you as an asshole if you were coughing and sneezing all over everyone when you showed up at work. Right. And so you just did that. But if that was portrayed on the media, right? If that was portrayed in a TV show, what would happen? That's fucking liberal propaganda.
Yeah.
Right? It's this argument about, this continued conversation over what normal is, and what might be normal in the real world is still radical and propaganda to a significant part of the population here in the U.S. In the same way, right, we talk about inclusion, right? We talk about representation, queer representation in media, right? Diversity in media. And we live in a diverse world. We are here, and not including us in the media would be very, very weird. But inclusion of queer characters and storylines in media is often talked about as propaganda, right? Why are you propagandizing your view of the world? And what we are doing is we are continuously having that this is what normal is kind of conversation. And so, as weird as it is, I think that I've come around to viewing that, it is propaganda, and that's not a bad thing.
Right.
It is a continuous pushing of ideals, and of normalcy. And if we don't recognize it as such, maybe we're robbing ourselves of an important tool, right? Was I normal? Was I having a knee-jerk reaction against propaganda? And so I was taking, milk toast stances on online, right? Doing shows. Was I being, was I waffling or being really weak on things because I did not want to appear like I'm creating propaganda? But if everybody is, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, then it shouldn't be whether or not I am creating or am not creating propaganda, but what am I espousing, right? What am I putting out in the world, and why is it important to do so?
I think propaganda, in my head, and this is kind of like me off the dome coming up with a rough draft, I think propaganda could be defined as if it's connected to a social or political cause, because everything outside of that is just branding and advertising. So, social or political causes, and also the connection to who benefits most. So, if the branding or advertising is about a political cause and or social issue, if there is a particular person or group or population that benefits, I think it could meet the definition of propaganda. That could be anything from, hey, we need to go to war and kind of reinforce the morale in this country, and therefore we all need to be loyal to this president. Propaganda. Or if it's
that active kind of, yeah.
Or, hey, you need to mask up because we don't know what this is. And it's very important that we be mindful of our neighbors and considerate and that we're all in this together. Also propaganda. So there's two different types of propaganda. There's like reinforcement of the power structure and reinforcement of the social power. I think that's my initial working definition. It's again rough draft, so work in progress.
No. And for me, I think that I would actually label both of those as that active propaganda, because I think that saying, I don't know, you ought to for these reasons, this kind of instructional, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to instill these values in you actively, is kind of that more generally well accepted. This is propaganda. And even in the chat, right, it was put forward that we could add for political purpose or agenda. But we fucking this is an old callback. We politicized Harambe. Like,
Yeah, we did.
I saying that a thing is political actually doesn't narrow the field, because we politicize everything, including the existence of other people. So if it's that broad, then I don't know if that addition to the definition for a political purpose or agenda is necessarily cutting it down, so I don't know. I think that, am I just creating an excuse for myself to create propaganda by rationalizing that everyone does it, or is this real? Is everything kind of a propaganda? And so recognizing that, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's both sides of it, at least.
Being someone who's been involved in politics for as long as I have, I think that everything is a campaign, everything is messaging. If you have an opportunity to be on message, if you have an opportunity to share what you think is beneficial with others, do it, regardless of whether or not you think it might be propagandistic or if it may come across as propaganda. I happen to think that being inclusive of all genders, gender identities, sexualities, sexes, races, colors, creeds, religions, however else you want to phrase it, I happen to think that's a very good thing, and it makes people uniquely qualified if they have one or more of those subsects as their identity. I think it brings more perspective. That could be viewed as propagandistic, but I also think it benefits the human race immensely, so I'm going to keep talking about it.
Well, and with this context now kind of shifted in my mind, the but doesn't even make sense, right? It being propaganda doesn't mean but it's helpful. It's just, it's propaganda and it's helpful.
Yeah.
That, that little bit of improv, yes and, if we just yes and it, we could recognize, that's the big shift for me. I know people are talking about it like crazy. Call in. I want to hear from you. People have had some really, really good points and some good questions, and we'd love to interact with you. Let me put the phone number out one more time. It is 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is on the line, ready to talk to you, and we are ready as well. We want to hear from you. Okay, so if everything is propaganda, if everything is just messaging and marketing, then Is nothing propaganda? How useful is the term if
I
we've
disagree
now...
with your premise. I don't think everything is propaganda.
Okay, what is not?
Uh, Eat this pizza because it tastes better than the rest. I don't necessarily. I think it's advertising. I don't think that's propaganda.
Hmm.
Um, Go to this college; it has the better program. Again, advertising, not propaganda. Um, I think the connection that makes it propaganda for me is if it is revolving around social order, social cause, or political purpose. Um, it's something to shape the way that the uh, societal conversation occurs. I think that is what kind of flips it from advertising or branding into propaganda. Anything commentating on social order or happenings that affect everybody or the political process.
Hmm.
That I think is what makes it propaganda.
Okay, so if we replaced pizza with cigarettes, would it...
Propaganda.
So the consumption of a thing, it's not propaganda because it's pizza. It's not propaganda because it it's not. Do you see what
So
I'm
it's
saying?
it's
Like,
I
yeah.
think the smoking issue turns it into propaganda because of the context that sorry, I'm shifting. I have ADHD. I fidget.
No, no,
Um,
you talk to me.
I think what makes it propaganda is the fact that we know the dangers of smoking, we know the risks associated with smoking, and we
Mm-hmm.
know that collectively it is so incredibly bad and harmful to our healths. Knowing what we know, so hearing. Having a company that disproportionately benefits from the consumption of that product, from the harm among society of that product, say, "Hey, do this because it'll make it be cool. You'll be a cowboy." That's propaganda
Sure.
because it flies in the face of the social order and it affects everybody, uh, not equally, but it does affect everybody.
I mean, so yes, I entirely agree. But just to play devil's advocate, like we also
Do it.
know that heart disease and obesity and those kinds of things are also killers.
Mhm.
And so pizza's not the healthiest food,
It's not.
you know,
It's not.
and we've definitely, taken this in the direction of, sugary sodas and things like that.
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess I'm going to lean back into the definition that I kind of gave early on, which is this conversation about norms,
Yeah.
what the status quo is. So if it's perceived as not the status quo, is it propaganda? And then if it is now the status quo, it's just effective propaganda that has fully integrated itself and
So
is
I
no longer
don't know. I
propaganda?
think
Does
when you
propaganda
mentioned
seek to
that,
eliminate itself? Yeah.
you mentioned that, I immediately started thinking about Supersize Me. What if McDonald's did
Yeah,
intend for us
supersize
to
me with
eat
propaganda. All right, go. Sorry.
what if McDonald's, so putting aside the critiques and understanding of how the documentary was made, what if McDonald's did intend for us to eat their meals 3 times a day and only their meals 3 times a day? Would it then become propaganda to me? I think it would, because we understand the dangers of fried food and fatty food and a high all beef diet. We understand what those risks are at this point. We understand that they are disproportionately harmful to the human body, consumed in large quantities. So I think if you're making the argument, hey, eat this and only this, that could be propaganda. But if you're just advertising, hey, if you're on a road trip, get McDonald's. It's going to be great. It's a good road trip food. Easy, throw it away. You'll feel full after, get some energy from the soda, have a blast. That's advertising. So I think it depends on the context of a given ad, actually, now that you say that.
Yeah, because like I don't know, Budweiser could do the same, and it's propaganda. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I do feel like that added nuance makes propaganda a more useful term to interact with
Yeah.
than it does remove that, because I think that that's my biggest concern there is when I'm seeking to define a thing, I want to find language that allows me to have more nuanced conversation.
Mhm.
And if I'm moving away from nuance, I'm creating a less useful definition. And
Yeah.
so my concern there was if I create a definition for propaganda that makes most things, at least, propaganda, then is it not useful? But okay, so if propaganda is effective enough, it becomes advertising.
I would switch the two.
Okay, if advertising is
If
effective
advertising
enough.
is effective enough, it becomes propaganda.
Really? So do you think a really, 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 really good Domino's pizza ad could become propaganda eventually, or?
I do.
Huh?
So,
Why?
yeah,
And we
why?
and we finally have callers, but I'm really excited about it. Like I want to hear this out.
So I don't know what the average age of your audience is. I don't see your demographic data, but let's say we have an audience that's old enough to remember when Domino's was widely regarded to be the worst fast food pizza chain, and then they did some retooling and some rejiggering of their recipe, and now they have the thing where we make all of our dough. It's never frozen, it's trucked into all the stores. You're getting fresh dough. Well, not that now you're like, oh, it could be fresh. That's fresher. That's obviously better than Pizza Hut's or Little Caesars pizza. They're $5 cheap, hot and ready, sitting out all day, ready when you have it, pre-made. Like is that then not starting to become propaganda? Because that could this is clearly the healthier option. If you're gonna eat pizza, eat this pizza. It's better for you. And I guess
I
it would depend on how pervasive and how rampant and what exactly are the claims being made in that advertising.
yeah,
And then
and
once that bar is cleared, you know it when you see it.
does it? Well, that's the thing is I want to move away from you know it when you see it, right? I want to find this. Does it become propaganda when people start having big feels about it? You know, let's.
I have big feels about my iPhone, so I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, well, I. All right, let's see what other people have to say about it. We got a couple of calls. Let's talk to Tim in the UK first off. Tim, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, how's it going? I've seen you in a while. How you been?
It's been a rough week, Tim. I'm not gonna lie.
What's been happening?
My grandpa died.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah, me too. I actually, as an adult, changed my name, my middle name, to his first name because he was one of the best men I've ever known. And passed. It's been a bummer, but happy to be here, happy to be interacting. And I saw that you had a topic, and I'd love to hear what's going on.
Well, I'm kind of trying to tie into kind of the topic of propaganda because I think it's kind of relevant.
Yeah.
Do you remember a few months ago I called up with a guy that's kind of on the subject of spiritualism kind of getting a free pass to an extent in the skeptic community.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Vaguely. Tim?
Sorry, yeah, no, I'm with you.
Oh, I said vaguely. I vaguely remember that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that.
No.
Yeah. So, and I tied it to a documentary, a Netflix documentary called Orgasm Inc., where basically, I think I left you. I think they were being, they've been arrested by the FBI and they're out on bail. The founder Nicole Ledone and the head of sales Rachel Cherwitz. So basically, just to fill anyone in who's not heard of it, it's basically it's kind of like a spiritualist wellness kind of thing, and they were basically just selling courses to vulnerable people.
Right.
It was actually Monday before last they were found guilty of forced labor charges. But anyway, the subject is one thing that I've kind of noticed is they've gone very heavy with the kind of propaganda, especially since the Netflix documentary. And I think what they were trying to do is kind of push this other narrative of it's like, oh, it's just a big conspiracy, they're out to get us. And I don't quite know why they were doing it. I think it was were they trying to kind of affect the jury somehow? I don't know. Or just maybe popular narrative and maybe something to do with them trying to defend their ego and kind of not portrayed as what they were doing. So, sorry.
No, it's okay. So before we dig in, let's set the table a little bit because I think partly I'm just maybe not in a full headspace that I'm accessing all this information. And so,
apologies.
So tell me about Rachel Cherwitz. Tell me about why they were arrested, what's going on specifically, and then maybe we can get into a little more detail.
Sure, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Yeah, so basically they were basically a kind of a spiritualist kind of thing where they were arguing about, they were basically kind of, it was a very kind of like sex positive spiritualism kind of thing. But basically they were basically bringing people in to try and sell them courses. And I think it started off with like the first one being like a couple $100. But I mean, I think there were some people paying like 16 grand a year for membership or something. And there were people basically kind of getting into huge amounts of debt to pay for these courses. And it turned out, apparently they were kind of, what was it?
So it sounds like
getting.
That sounds like Scientology, but with more sex.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
It was very kind of. It wasn't so much Scientology, that kind of vibe. It was more kind of like the New Agey crystals, homeopathy kind of thing.
Okay.
But yeah, that's very much what it is. And it turns out, this came out of the trial. Apparently, they were kind of getting members to kind of have sex with like potential investors or something. And that's one of the things that kind of. I think they initially put prostitution on the charges, but I think it was just forced labor in the end. So yeah, so it's it's interesting, but I think a lot of it is about kind of gaslighting and I mean, I don't know, it's the same kind of thing. It's like it's one of those things. It's like they talk in a way where it's almost like they're gaslighting people into thinking they've got something when they haven't. If you know what I mean? It's
absolutely.
Like they know they're trying to trick people.
Yeah.
But then they kind of make it out like, I think they're saying it's like, well, their argument they're saying with their propaganda, bringing back to the subject, is that they're kind of saying that it's just like the society's trying to keep them down, or they're scared of what they were doing and how they were helping people, but they weren't. I mean, they're saying they're helping people, but they're not even defining what it is they're doing. So, I mean, the whole thing, they kind of focus around this kind of practice called OM, or orgasmic meditation, where basically you it's...
Orgasm what?
Orgasmic meditation. And they...
I mean,
basically involves...
That's pretty appealing, I'm not going to lie. I'm interested.
This is how they made so much money. It's basically what it is. It's mainly only kind of a female thing, where like a woman kind of spreads her legs and then a partner kind of strokes her clit for 15 minutes, basically. That's literally it. And they were selling like courses for like, I mean, it was one of these upsell things where basically it was, you get them in like the small courses and they kind of say you need to buy the next one and the next one and the next one. And there's nothing much to it, I don't think. It was just them kind of making out that it's a bigger thing than it was.
Okay. So it says in the notes you're saying that this kind of spiritualism has a free pass in the skeptic community?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of what I talked about last time, and I think a lot of it does tend to be about religion. I think religions tend to be these huge institutions that kind of get a bit more attention. But I think the thing is, I've noticed about things like, in this case, that basically they don't really make a claim, and I think that's how they get away with it. You know, it's like, because say if I asked to say something like the moon's made out of cheese, okay, that's wrong, but at least that's a claim that's testable to an extent. But if you kind of make these vague statements that aren't actually saying anything, you can't test it because it's not even testable, you know?
Yeah.
Well, something like, I don't know, take, what's the word, transubstantiation in Catholicism, saying, is it, again, it's right, I may not be. The idea is when you kind of get Holy Communion, the bread you eat
becomes the body of
Christ.
Yeah, and the blood of Christ.
Okay, that's bullshit, but that's testable. And in a way that kind of makes it easier, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
I don't know.
No. It's a really good point. I think that it's a blind spot that people in the skeptic community have. So let's talk about it. Absolutely. Okay. So this is something that I ran into quite a bit when I was really, really active, involved in atheist spaces and communities in person. There's this idea that everything can be tested. And if it cannot be tested, it doesn't exist.
Sure.
And I feel like this kind of hard, I'm losing the language right now, which is frustrating, but just that everything is kind of based in testable propositions, loses sight of a lot of the ways that people get taken advantage of. And so it took me a while to kind of get to a place where I can engage with that. I think that a skeptic space that pops into mind for me is I see kind of in the intellectual dark web kind of bro atheist spaces and skeptic spaces, that there's a number of people who kind of embrace this Jungian interpretation of things. So if it's not physical and testable, then it's what Jordan Peterson says. And without enough other options, then people kind of fall into that. And so I guess I can see where that is. Yeah, if it's not testable, then we can't definitively say it doesn't exist. And so we kind of turn a blind eye to it. No, that's fair. I don't know. What do you think, Atticus?
It's a great question. What do I think? I do think that this is kind of a squeaky wheel kind of situation. Like, okay. I do think that's kind of the crunchy granola, woo-woo mystical stuff on the fringes does tend to get a bit of a pass. But I think it's because it's more of a, who cares? Like someone's engaging in crystals. Cool. Does it make them happy? Sure. Does it really affect, are they legislating based off of it? No. So while I don't necessarily buy into it, and I don't think that anybody should buy into anything without any sort of proof, or I don't think people should come off the sidelines of neutrality without evidence showing one way or the other.
Well, so let's apply that, right? I know that Dianetics was originally this kind of, get your thetan level tested, and basically it was about managing your stress and your anxiety, and then helping give you the tools to be able to interact well in society, right? Maybe you're not very confident, maybe you want to learn how to be a better speaker, and so they would offer those classes, and that led right into and created the foundation for Scientology. At what point does it stop becoming, okay, it's not bothering anybody and it's kind of you doing whatever weird thing you're doing, it doesn't matter, to it starts to matter? When does it start to matter?
I think it matters when it starts, personally. Like, I don't think that Dianetics as like a whole, not that you're saying that it does. I don't think anything should get a pass if it doesn't have any sort of proof, if it doesn't have any sort of demonstrable ability. Why get off the side of neutrality? I always use the analogy of guilty, not guilty, and innocent. I'm not getting my ass off the not guilty line unless you have evidence that demonstrably proves guilty or innocence.
Okay, so
I need to be convinced, and
that sounds contrary to what you said at first, though. It sounded like at first you were kind of giving like a laissez-faire kind of, live and let
I don't care
live.
if other people do it, but I'm not going to be caught dead believing in something without evidence.
Okay,
but and in terms of why it gets a pass, it's because there are bigger fish to fry. Mostly, like, people want to spend their energies trying to get rid of the most present danger, and the most present danger for a lot of people who share our general view on the world is typically Christian nationalism. So that's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. I don't really care if Karen down the road sets up crystals and uses essential oils because it makes her feel better. I think she's wrong, and I don't think we should humor it. But
so if we're worried about Christian nationalism, should we stop worrying about TERFs in the skeptic and leftist spaces?
I think we should worry about people's reasoning skills first and foremost. That's my like always go to, like, oh, your reasoning skills aren't super great, let's talk about that.
Okay, so if we're worrying about the reasoning skills, then maybe we should care more.
Possibly.
So, okay.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, what's up?
Sure. A couple of things you said. I think you said regards to you've got the guilty, innocent, and not guilty. I think the line normally comes at when you're charging money for something. That's especially like if you're charging somebody for a product or a service, there needs to be a pretty strong evidence that that thing actually works. Which right now I don't think they are. But I completely agree, with regards to critical thinking. I think that's the thing that I think, especially in schools, I think people are taught what to think, not so much how to think. And it kind of falls into this kind of argument from authority fallacy, which works very well in something like science. So say, for example, you get a university lecturer or a very prominent researcher who says something, that's somebody who should be believed. But the problem with that is that on the internet especially, there's a lot of people out there saying they're an expert at something when really they're not. And I think that was very much the case that happened here. It's people kind of saying, oh, I've got this experience, or I'm an expert in this subject. And it's almost kind of the form of hero worship, if you know what I mean.
Oh, absolutely.
It's kind of like, it's about the person more than the idea, but really it should be about the idea more than the person.
Agreed. And that's definitely not how we interact with it. I know I'm leaping to this example, but it's because I recently did a video a few weeks ago for a friend of mine that was about Jordan Peterson. And so he pops to mind more often recently. But yeah, no, I mean, that I think that's a perfect example, right? You have a psychologist who is masquerading as a philosopher. And because he may have experience in his designated field, people are going, this is an expert, even though he's talking about things that are not related to his, particular field of expertise. And so that hero worship kind of floats him along, so that it kind of empowers him to talk about things that he has no business talking about.
I'll half agree with you there. I would say just because you're not a quote-unquote expert, just because you're not formally have qualifications in a subject, that doesn't mean you're wrong about that subject. My point is, you should believe something. I mean, this is idealized, obviously, but you should believe something because it makes sense and it's got evidence to back it up, not because somebody said it. You should believe. So, say if Jordan Peterson said something that's, say, outside the subject of his field, you shouldn't believe it or disbelieve it because it was Jordan Peterson who said so. That's kind of an ad hominem fallacy. You should believe it or not believe it, or be unsure based on the evidence.
It's an appeal to authority fallacy.
Exactly.
I entirely agree. I think what I was trying to say is that he's relying on that authority to float him into legitimacy in talking about other subjects. And you're right. No, exactly. Tim, I think we're on the same page. If we evaluated claims based on the evidence that that is supporting that claim alone, and we would be more objective about it. But we don't really live in that world. We live in a world where we create heroes. I mean, I have gotten to meet a lot of people in the scientific, skeptic, atheist, philosophy spaces. I've gotten to meet and know personally a lot of content creators, authors, and personalities on TV and in movies, like, who are in this space. And even people who are very highly respected, I kind of find an inverse relationship between their expertise and their EQ.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
it's a matter of power corrupts in some respects.
I don't think it's
intellectual cop out.
I don't think it's a corruption thing. I think it's a if you have enough power, then you don't need to develop emotionally. Because people will just kind of kowtow. And so if you don't have a reason to emotionally develop, then you focus on, I'm going to, focus on these intellectual pursuits only. And you lose sight of the fact that you're becoming a man-child. And that is what I find a lot of, not all of, there are still plenty of, big content creators who aren't, but there are a lot of adult children in those spaces. So, I don't know.
Were they always that way, or do they become that way because of where they've gone to?
Both. I have seen people go from zero to very, very popular, and known them personally. And I've seen seeds of narcissistic and abusive behavior that did not have a place to grow take root once they got popularity. And so something that was not necessarily a red flag, just that thing's kind of weird, become a big problem because they were able to nurture that volatility.
So do you think the reason they kind of come to like an area of if you have a platform in a way that it's kind of what we're talking about is kind of almost a second to it. It's more about kind of getting popularity and getting fame. That's kind of their main goal. The other things are kind of an excuse.
Well,
actually, I'm reading a book. Have you heard of a book called Sorry, I'll let you carry on.
No. I kind of want to tie this back though, because I think that's important. You had mentioned earlier that you saw that there was a problem once people started charging.
Yes.
And I think there's a big issue there, because I think that the only people who are moralizing charging are the people who care enough to moralize about it and are the people who should probably charge. And the people who have no problem charging for their services are often the people who are taking advantage of their positions of power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, I agree with you.
So I've had long conversations with friends who have large channels who were terrified about replacing their car that didn't work with a used car that looked nice enough or a new car, because they were worried that their patrons would view them as throwing away the money that was contributed to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I can't get a nice thing. They work their ass off 7 days a week for years on end. And they're totally afraid of actually using the money that they earned to put a down payment on a house or something like that. They moralize it to the point where they feel like they need to be paupers their entire life in order to maintain legitimacy in their own eyes, and to project legitimacy to their fans. Meanwhile, other people are, but I'll point at Jordan Peterson, right? Dude was making, I think, $400,000 a month. He had absolutely no problem with that. And I think that we are then creating a moral scenario where the only people who care are the ones who we want to see grow, and the people who don't care aren't running up against this now fabricated barrier,
Sure.
So if that's the case, effectively, I kind of take the money making piece off of the table, and instead try and find other values to investigate, because the money piece, in my experience, has only had a negative effect on everything, and not in the way that you would think,
Yeah, I mean, I half agree with you. It depends. I think it's more the concept of wellness, because obviously wellness is like what's the word? Like a pseudonym for kind of health and medicine.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's basically, because obviously you legally can't call yourself a doctor unless you're an actual medical doctor, which is good. But then they kind of get around that, saying it's not medicine, it's wellness, which isn't really defined. I think that my point is something like a doctor who actually, there's a lot of studies, it goes into medicine, and that doesn't necessarily mean that our current understanding of medicine is necessarily 100% right. I'm very sure there's probably treatments out there that probably are doing more harm than good, or it's not quite the right thing, because the human body is very complicated. But it's the best we have with our current knowledge and understanding. So then the problem,
So what kind of strong lines can we draw here, right? We've been circling this issue about spiritualism and not very verified things getting a free pass or not being looked at critically in skeptic spaces, right? And so examples that we've given now involve, wellness, people who preach wellness, people who preach courses, groups like this culty example that you had of orgasmic meditation. Was that it?
That was it, yes.
Yeah, things like that. not being viewed critically. And I guess the first question is, why isn't it being viewed critically? Right. The first thing that you said when you called in is because they're not making scientifically testable claims. Is that the
Yes.
only reason?
I think that's a big part of it, and I think a big part of it's kind of they have very kind of politicians' answers. When you ask a question, they'll basically, I mean, I don't know, they've got a load of like videos online. They kind of tie back into the propaganda thing, but basically they just kind of ramble on and on and on. So it overwhelms people with information, or quote unquote information. So it kind of confuses it. But really, I think the first thing to look for is simply a simple, theoretically testable claim, or something that is like, this is what it is, and this is why it's important, and that kind of basic question.
Okay.
And then from that, you can kind of go from, is this true or not? How do you measure it? And I also find that hold
on. Let's take that for what it is. If we were to recreate this experiment and I told you to meditate, and while you were meditating, I brought you to orgasm, then we could test that and find that it worked. And if that's the case, then wouldn't that be an authentic mark in the, hey, this is true category?
Well, true in what sense? I mean, what part of that's true?
That you meditated and you were brought to orgasm.
But that's the thing, though. They're not even saying that. That's the name of the practice.
Okay, so what is the claim being made?
Sorry?
So what is the claim being made?
There isn't one. That's my point. It's more just like a generic health benefiting people, self-growth kind of thing. That's literally it.
Yeah. Okay. No, I get it. Honestly,
that's how I've been feeling.
No. So what this makes me think of is I have, since getting into making content, spent way too much time around too many people who do startup kind of tech bro stuff.
Sure.
Less since I moved to Portland, but in Austin it was terrible. But this kind of generic, not really advocating, but I get it. It's a vibe. How do you empirically test a vibe?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you look at Who Moved My Cheese or the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and go, you know what, you're selling me something weird here. This is not, you're not just selling me what's in the book. You're selling me a lifestyle and a culture.
Yes.
I working for I'm not going to name names because I probably could be liable to some degree. But I will say that I was around a lot of CEOs who were very comfortable thinking that they were around their peers. And one of them said very confidently, I'll never forget this. He stands up in the middle of the room and goes, well, I know that if the world is going to be saved, it's going to be a CEO that does it. It's going to be a job creator who saves the world. And so we need to nurture us. And Atticus, you okay? It looks like your eyes are about to roll out of your head.
Yeah, I wouldn't have lasted very long at that gathering if someone had said that in front of me.
I was getting paid to be there. I had to.
Oh, I bet. I would also have to be paid to be there.
But no, I'm with that. If someone is selling a vibe, then yeah, it's hard to test it. But that just means that we need to be better.
Possible.
Well, it is possible if we get better at pinning down the claims, right?
Well, that's the thing, though. It's in their interest to not pin down the claims, because that's kind of the point, though. It's like, if you're full of shit, then you don't want the other person to pin down your claim, because as soon as they test it, they know you're full of shit. So it's like they don't want you to know that. That's the whole point. Is to make it as unclear as possible.
Right.
That's their whole point. That's their tactic.
And so when you convert that into propaganda, instead of saying, white people are preferred and we need to keep the non-white people out, it becomes Western society is under attack, and the goodness in the world comes from, Western ideals, right? Which is just dog whistling what they really mean, which is the former statement, right? White hegemony. So I think that we need to get better about pointing out what that claim is. When they say Western society is under attack, if you fall into well, what do you mean by Western society? You have fully gone down the route that, yeah, you're never going to get there. But if you say, oh, do you mean white hegemony, you fucking piece of shit? Like, maybe you're not going to get through to them, but maybe you'll do a better job at reaching the people who are listening and going, oh shit, that's what they're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then I think that's what we should be doing, is, calling it for what it is and being more specific about it. Quit following them down those rabbit holes, because it's there for them to disappear their true meaning. Just like you said, obfuscation is I entirely agree. And it has been brought to my attention more than once that the way that, early Nazis talked about, their race issues and had conversations about fascism, where they made a lot of jokes, right? It was just funny. Let's just interact with it. I mean, why are you taking this so seriously? It wasn't serious until it was. And I think that people obfuscate and people play down the things that are, someone will say something very authentically, but when you call them out, they go, oh, it was just a joke. We need to be better about calling that out. And I think that's how we get through it, right? If somebody is saying, hey, reaching an orgasm through meditation is great, cool. But if they're using that to, Trojan horse in their real statement, which is, we have the way to spiritual enlightenment or whatever, true happiness, then yeah, we need to call that out. We need to quit saying, oh, hey, it's about whatever orgasms. It's really about you trying to push through a cult. Why are you, what's up?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, kind of bringing back to Scientology you're talking about, because I'm just can't remember. I know Louis Theroux did a documentary on them, but anyway, anyone who kind of like tried investigating Scientology, they become very militant against them, don't they? And that's kind of probably what it is. They don't want their secrets to kind of be held under any sort of light, so they kind of do everything they can. I think it's one of those things. So they're kind of trying to punish people for doing kind of what you were just saying. I
don't think so. Honestly, I think they really think that for themselves. It makes me. This might be a moment where V gets really mad at me for sharing too much. But I'm gonna do it anyway. Atticus, you can tell on me if you want. This is okay, I guess.
Oh boy.
So when V and I first started hanging out, it was entirely platonic. We were just friends, and we did not develop romantically for a while. But we started having movie nights, hanging out. Friends have movie nights, right? Friends cuddle, right? There was this thing happening between us that we did not admit to ourselves, but to everyone on the outside was very, very clear that we were romantically growing and getting more involved. And I think that when people are just making jokes, man, when they're just interacting with fascism, racism, and baiting different topics about, transphobia and that kind of shit, I think they are romancing fascism. I think they are falling in love with something vile. And I don't think they're recognizing it themselves. We see it from the outside, and so we think, oh, that's on purpose. But I don't think it's necessarily always on purpose. I think a lot of them are just ignorant to the broader context of what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree that's the mechanism, but I disagree that necessarily that's, as an abstract concept's a bad thing. Obviously, yeah, in the course of fascism it is, yes. but like we use humor to kind of feel things out, to kind of see, well, what's acceptable and what's socially unacceptable. And in a way, it kind of makes it as like a safe kind of way of doing it. So it's like, yes, sure. Well, no, humor kind of, it facilitates social change. But the thing is, though, that social change could either be positive or negative. It was actually, wasn't it Hitler who was it the Nazis who, they actually banned communions? Because obviously, once they'd kind of got their regime in place, then it's we need to kind of shut down all kind of means of kind of the culture changing back in the other direction. So they kind of make humor illegal, effectively. So I guess it depends. It's like, well, how much do you want this current status quo to change, and how much kind of stability do you want regulates it?
Right. I'm not saying to make humor illegal, but the reason that they made humor illegal to a degree is because they recognized just how effective it was in getting them in power in the first place. And so I'm not saying that we need to police away humor. I think we need to clearly call it out for what it is when it happens. And if somebody wants to cry about how they were canceled because they said a thing that was obviously shitty and so we're treating them thusly, then so be it. But there need to be consequences for people doing and saying shitty things, whether they're trying to joke or not, because that's how it got us there and it's how it's getting us here. But Tim, we actually have a good number of other callers, so I did want to give you and Atticus the chance to say anything else before we move on.
I have nothing more to add. I think that was a good conversation. It's something that is a definite blind spot for those of us not falling into the chasm of the alt-right pipeline. There's a lot of bad thinking or bad methods of thinking that can get us into some not so great spots. I think it was a good blind spot to bring up.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey, Tim, I feel like I am very in this United States centric place where I'm developing this myopia where I'm not seeing what's going on in the rest of the world. So hearing about things that are concerns from other places, other countries, is actually really refreshing. So I appreciate your call. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you, man. Though, hate to break it to you, it was actually an American company. They tried setting up in the UK, but it was all in America. So I apologize.
You had to, fine, Tim.
Sorry, I apologize. I'll try and bring you something Eurocentric next time. How's that?
Sounds awful.
Thanks. Take care, man.
Take care, brother. All right, so we have got 2 calls about propaganda and 1 call about Iran. What do you want to take first?
Let's do a sandwich. Let's put propaganda, then Iran, then propaganda.
All right. So I will take our caller who's been waiting the longest to talk about propaganda first. Sure. Because Z has been waiting for a while. Bree, how's it going?
Doing okay. Hiding from the heat.
Yeah, it is.
We've got a heat advisory until like 9:00 tonight. So
that's because you're in the wrong place. It is 58 degrees here in Portland right now.
Yes, it is.
Oh man,
I know, right? So you wanted to talk about propaganda and advertising. What's on your mind?
So because we were talking, you guys were talking earlier about the difficulty between separating out propaganda and advertising, and I think that's because propaganda itself is a type of advertising.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I mean, like in terms of like, and really the only difference there is the goals and exactly who is doing it. Because generally speaking, we think of propaganda as, you know, being more originating from the government, from a government or a government agency. So whereas your more advertising is going to be more from like a company that's looking to make a profit or something.
I think that's
trying to sell you a product.
I think that's a good distinction. And I think that an earlier version of me thought that the only kind of propaganda that existed was one that would come from a government, right? That kind of first one you brought up. But not recognizing that we inadvertently create propaganda all of the time, every time that we try and represent a view of the world, then we are kind of letting that pass. So is everything propaganda?
I suppose technically speaking, I think propaganda itself is a bit of a loaded word, which has like a negative connotation because of how we've, traditionally used it and stuff.
Sure.
So, I mean, I suppose generally speaking, propaganda is advertising that we don't like or disagree with. For most people, anyway.
That's a really good oh my God. Okay, hold on a second. Let's play in that space, because thinking about kind of the origins of talking about propaganda, right? What you're looking at is early mid 1900s. You have pushes for the war, against the war, and then into the Cold War, right? And so at least in the United States, we view this in the context of the Russians have propaganda. They're saying that you ought to be communist and you ought to hate Western imperialism. And they were doing that by creating propaganda, but we weren't doing it. They were, right? It was that which we disagreed with.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
If you can just recognize that a thing can be disagreed with, does that mean that we could recognize it as propaganda? Or can propaganda only exist in your own frame of reference? So, like, I know you, Bree. This is not, you're not a random caller. We can talk about, I think all three of us can talk about queer representation in media. And if you have a diverse cast on a TV show, that's normal. That's not propaganda. But would you recognize that as propaganda to somebody who didn't see the world the way we did?
People
I'm going to interject here and say I
generally
think
are not
that's
queer affirming. They would say that that's propaganda because to them you're pushing a narrative or a viewpoint that they dislike.
Right, and
I think it is propaganda on its face. Okay, I agree with it, but it's still propaganda. Like I think it because it addresses a social cause. It is someone's perspective that they are putting forward, and it affects the wider view of it. I think it's important propaganda. I think it's important that viewers who watch TV shows can see that a black woman can be a police officer or a judge on a Law and Order SVU or that kind of thing. I think it is important to see those things in positions of power so that the populace as a whole can realize, hey, you can do cool shit. But it's still propaganda, even if I agree with it. I think it's pushing a social cause and a social thing that I happen to agree with.
What do you think, Bree?
I think a lot of the distinction between what is and isn't considered propaganda has a lot to do with how we treat something that we call propaganda. Because when something is identified as propaganda, it's always with this implication that you can just dismiss it because it's propaganda.
So what I guess I'm interested in you interacting with what Atticus had said, that Atticus views it as propaganda and useful propaganda. Do you, in this example of queer representation in media, do you view that as propaganda as well?
I think in a more how to put this, someone who's actually more concerned with definitions and less about feels would definitely say, yes, that's propaganda, and it's good propaganda, and we should have that. Because it's kind of like, I think a lot of times propaganda is kind of a bit like woke for a lot of people. But yes, if we're to go it's a constructed framework to push a particular social or political viewpoint, then of course it's propaganda, and it's propaganda that I agree with, to have queer representation in TV shows and stuff like that.
Okay. So propaganda, I think, are we saying that across the board, everyone in this call thinks that propaganda is not inherently bad?
I think so.
Yes.
I think we could use with more propaganda. I think I look back on the anti-fascist advertising of the late 40s, early 50s, where I think Frank Sinatra was in this particular one. Some guys on a soapbox talking about fascism and how the Germans they were just doing what they thought was best for their people. They didn't have some such bad ideas. And then I think Frank Sinatra does his like swaggery walk up the sidewalk and goes, "That guy's saying a lot of really powerful stuff, and he's really enthusiastic about it." He goes, "Yeah, he's making some sense." He goes, "Well, is he?" And then he jumps into a diatribe about how otherizing people is bad for you, and those are your neighbors you're talking about. You got to stand as a community. Like, I think that's good propaganda, and I think there needs to be more of it. Honestly, I look at it and I'm like, wow, we could really use with some collective group hugs via our advertising and the media.
Okay, so to kind of extrapolate that a bit, just putting this out there, floating this to see what you both think.
Mm-hmm.
If we expand a definition of propaganda that includes one that's not just governments, right, like Bree, you were saying before, but is what we are all engaging with, right? If it is this continued discussion with each other over what norms are, what reality is, I guess I'm thinking out loud here, so please forgive me. If governments are the only, or if a government is the only system that can create propaganda, then it feels like they're the only ones who get to decide what normal is. And if we have access to propaganda, if we are creating propaganda, then are we taking a larger role in being able to define what normal is and what the status quo is, and not necessarily relying on a government to tell us what it is?
So I think I disagree with the premise that only governments can create propaganda.
An issue with. Sorry, what did you say, Atticus?
I said I think I disagree with the premise that only governments can create propaganda.
Yeah, because I think this is where we're running into the issue of what people think propaganda is versus what the actual definition of propaganda is.
Well, and
kind of like Drew said, I mean, there's a big disconnect between the actual dictionary definition and the way we commonly use the word.
Right. And that's kind of the premise of, why I wanted to have this conversation. Atticus, I agree with you that not only governments are not the only institution that can create propaganda. I think that the way I interacted with it for most of my life, it was with the assumption that only governments can create propaganda. Mm-hmm. And even, referencing what Bree had referenced earlier, this idea that propaganda is something that comes from a government, and that's how we've, kind of viewed it, right? I'm bringing this up to try and drive home the point that viewpoint with those blinders up, that propaganda comes from government, gives government the only role that can define what is the status quo. Mm-hmm. And so by expanding that definition the way that we have, we are taking that for ourselves and making that something that does not require a government to tell us what is normal and what isn't. Did I say that better this time?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, because I would say that the way people use it, part of it, the idea that, only governments, produce propaganda means that for a lot of people, when they receive what is ostensibly propaganda from a source that does not originate from a government, they're less likely to identify it as propaganda and more likely to just simply accept it as true.
Well,
does that make sense?
Ish.
So to play off of what Bree just said, there's something that I've noticed that I happened to have gotten very good at inadvertently while I was kind of growing into my political ideology. And it's that I am not a partisan, I am an ideologue. I look at things and I view them through where on this ideological spectrum that they fall and kind of where that is in relation to what I value. So my values inform my partisanship and not the other way around, which is, I don't think a whole lot of people do. And the reason I say that is because when I was in the heyday of Facebook, of 2015 through 2018, is when I think Facebook kind of peaked. There was a giant page called Occupy Democrats, and it goes viral every once in a while for taking captions and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that makes me feel good. Click. And now at this point, now that I kind of more have informed my partisanship with my ideology, I'm like, cool, yeah, that's not for me. I'm already on that side. That's not what that click is for. That click is to convince other people or make other people feel better about themselves, or it's advertising or to spark a conversation. It's not for me because I'm already on that side. Let me keep scrolling. So,
So I just want to, I'm checking in on the live chat, and creative writer, you should call in. You specifically should call in. I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, not interrupt.
Bree, I appreciate you lending some more perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
It's also just good hearing from
It's
you.
always fun to talk to you.
Heck yeah. Take care of yourself.
Yep. Right.
Bye.
Bye.
I fucking love Nuance. I'm very happy. Like,
The world needs more of it,
well,
possibly, under the right conditions.
I this is probably going to come off bad to some people watching this, but in my experience in skeptic spaces, there are a lot of people that got a touch of the tism. And it has been freeing to me to interact with people who have a touch of the tism, because never in my life have I had people in my life who go, "Oh, you lied. That's okay. Why? But why? Right? Lying is not necessarily a bad thing. Lying for a bad reason is a bad thing. If I lie to you, hopefully you know that is for a good reason. But if I lied to you for, the act of lying is not necessarily bad. It's why you did it. And that's a level of nuance that a lot of neurotypical people don't have. And I feel like that's similar when in talking about propaganda, that if you take that extra step and go, the propaganda itself is not what makes it bad. It's what is the purpose and why is it, why are we talking about it?
Yep.
And that's the nuance that that I fucking adore. All right. Oh no. Oh, we had our caller about Iran who just dropped out. Let's see if they call back in. In the meantime, let's talk to our other caller, Ethan in Michigan. Ethan, you're live on the show.
Hi. Hold on, I gotta cough real quick.
No worries.
Sorry about that. First time, long time, and all that.
Yeah. What's on your
And
mind?
there goes my train of thought. God damn it.
No, it's okay.
Earlier, sorry, what?
I can see in the notes it said you want to talk about, do we maybe still need a nuanced definition if everything is propaganda?
Yeah. So earlier you were talking about how you wanted to try to find a more nuanced definition, and that just made me think, okay, but what if we just can't carve out different categories? Like, what if it just all media really is propaganda? Would you still find the need to try to find or to even force some sort of nuanced definition to carve out exceptions?
Hey, Eric, there's some audio on my end. The audio is blown out. I can't really hear them. It's just a bunch of...
I have like 10 fans here. Let me switch out my earbuds and just try the phone itself.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry about that. If I can find the little container, where the hell is it?
Atticus, I don't think it was just you.
okay. Gotcha.
Ethan is sounding a little blown out for sure.
Gotcha. Okay.
But
Yeah, it reminds me of the drive-throughs in the late '90s where you couldn't hear anything.
oh my God, you're right. Well, that means that viewers are having trouble hearing it too, which makes it a good call out on your part.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry about that. Is that better?
That's a lot
that
better.
is much more intelligible. Yes.
Yeah. I had my earbuds and I've got like 10 fans going because it is in Michigan and it is 90 plus degrees and very, very humid.
No worries. That sounds fucking brutal. Okay, so could you hit us with that again?
Yes. So earlier in the show, you were talking about how you wanted a more nuanced definition of propaganda so as not to just say, oh, everything's propaganda. And that just got me thinking, but what if?
But what if
it turns out that, all media really is? Would you still find the need to carve out and even force a special exception to say, no, this isn't propaganda?
Atticus, what do you think? Or do you want me to take a first stab at this?
Can you translate? I couldn't hear it.
Sure. So Ethan was saying
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. So Ethan was saying that if we are calling everything propaganda,
Yeah.
then effectively, what is the use of the term? Should we still be calling other things out as propaganda specifically, right?
No.
Or is there anything that's not propaganda?
What I was going. That's not what I was going for at all.
Sorry. Could you say again then?
So if it turns out that you can't really find a definition for propaganda that has some sort of nuance that actually doesn't. No, that's a bad way to put it.
No worries. Let's work on it together.
I'm sorry. I just had coffee and all the social anxieties and brain fog and crap.
My friend, you are super good. You are super good. So you were saying that at first you're kind of talking about trying to define propaganda and whether or not we're able to get a useful, nuanced definition of propaganda.
No. What you had said earlier about you wanting to find a nuanced definition had got me thinking, what if we just can't? What if it turns out that all media actually is propaganda? This is a what if thought kind of question.
Got it.
Yeah. So in that situation, would you still find the need, like you two personally, would you still find the need to make there be some sort of exception to what is and is not propaganda?
So Atticus, would you like me to restate that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Ethan,
I'm so sorry.
No. You're good.
No apology necessary.
Yeah, it just means that I may need to restate it as well for everyone listening. So this is beneficial all the way around. You're super good. So Ethan can tell me if I got this right or wrong. What Ethan was saying was that earlier in the call, I had said that I'm looking for a nuanced definition, trying to find language that contributes to nuanced conversation. And Ethan is saying in the hypothetical that maybe we are not able to do that, that if it does turn out that kind of everything is propaganda, then are there any situations where we would still find it useful to call something out as propaganda?
It's still...
Are we losing the nuance? Does that...
It's not so much are we losing the nuance, but is there a point to making there be nuance if it turns out that there is none to be had?
Is it a point... If there is no nuance to be had, is there a point in specifically calling out nuance? Okay. Or specifically calling out propaganda. Okay. Let me take a stab at this.
It's less about the calling out propaganda. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm gonna
I'm
try.
doing such a bad job at communicating this, and I don't know how to do it better.
You're gonna armchair quarterback it, and after 5 minutes on the after ending the call, it's gonna come to you, and it is the case for everyone. The number of times I've put my foot in my mouth or not come up with a word live on air, it happens every show. Well, you're super good, and I've been doing this for years. You're solid.
But yeah, it's what I'm interested for this thought isn't calling out the propaganda. It's, is there a use to calling out nuance? Is there a point? Is there a need to making there be things that aren't propaganda? If and make that and carving out such a special exemption.
Sure.
If it's a situation where everything really is propaganda.
Got it. So Ethan is saying that it's not about calling out propaganda. It's about, is there benefit then to calling out or in identifying things that aren't propaganda, right? If everything is kind of propaganda, is there a benefit to us going, okay, maybe specifically this isn't, maybe Domino's isn't, but cigarette companies are, or if everything is propaganda except for Bob's Burgers, is that a little closer to it, Ethan?
Kinda.
Okay.
I don't want to keep bogging it down. That's close enough for government work.
Okay. So here's my thought. I think that specifically in skeptic atheist spaces, I'm going to use an analogy here. I'm just going to bring up something similar to help make my point. Specifically in skeptic atheist spaces, we talk about objectivity a lot, right? How do you scientifically view a thing? How do you objectively look at a fact? And I think a lot of people in skeptic atheist spaces pretend like they can sanitize their view of the world to take all of their biases out of the equation, right? So just look at the facts. Don't get into your feelings, right? That kind of thing. And I think that they're doing that to try and create objectivity. And I think that's ass backwards. In order to create and really view things in an objective way, you need to start by recognizing that you have biases that you can't take out because you have your lens of the world that you view the world through, and you cannot remove your lens. And because of that, you cannot pretend like you don't have biases. Instead, you consider that you have biases and then account for that in your study, right? So whenever you're presenting a thing, we need to quit fucking pretending that we don't have bias in order to make something seem objective. If you want my respect, you need to recognize that you have bias and then account for it when you're giving that information. And I think that similarly, when it comes to propaganda, the benefit of it is that instead of saying this is propaganda, that's not propaganda, if all of it is propaganda, then you're going to get my respect by first recognizing that it is and accounting for it in the conversation that you have.
So at that point, you think you wouldn't find the need to carve out nuance where there may not be any in that situation.
Well, so if I'm taking it on face value, if there is no nuance, then trying to carve out nuance where there is none would be not useful.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but
that is mostly what I was.
Got it. Yeah.
I didn't think it would be a long call. Honestly, I thought it would be a quick. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I do think that better nuance can be had by recognizing our biases and then going with that forward. So even if we did define everything as propaganda, I don't think we are losing nuance. I think we are injecting it by now saying, hey, you need to, create this filter where everything that you look at, you go, what is this propaganda of? How do I account for that bias in the way that I'm objectively looking at this thing? And how can I present an objective view of this thing, taking into account the bias that I have, or, the bias that is present in the people who have created that thing.
And doing that leads to more interesting conversations anyway.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the heart of media literacy. So, win-win.
Exactly.
Ethan, thank you for pushing through this with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll try the web caller if I ever think of something to call about again, because my headset seems to be a lot more decent at this stuff.
Usually, yeah, the phone.
Or maybe it's just Discord is better than.
Honestly, I think that just normal phone lines, we've gotten so used to using things like Discord and online calls that the clarity is just expected, and so we don't recognize just how poor
phone quality has dropped in the last 20 years to a ridiculous extent.
I don't know if it's dropped. I think we had a kind of a blindness to it. And now that we have higher fidelity, it's more recognizable.
Maybe.
Yeah. But
if you go back and listen to archived recordings of like talk shows in the 90s, they're not too far off from the audio quality now.
It's truly terrible. Ethan,
fair enough.
Thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
All right. So with what you were able to get out of that, any thoughts?
My understanding was that if everything is propaganda, what is the usefulness of nuance? Yes? Am I on that right track?
So Ethan's question was about not as what is the usefulness of nuance, but can we even create the nuance of specifically saying, well, this isn't, but everything else is. But I think the more interesting piece there is what nuance can we create by saying everything's propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Well, I still disagree with the premise. I don't think everything's propaganda.
Okay.
No, and I don't think you do either.
I don't know. I you said a thing, and now I'm tentatively changing a definition to be once it's effective enough, it just becomes advertising.
I still think it's the inverse. I think it's the rectangle and square relationship. I think all propaganda is advertising, but not all advertising is propaganda.
Goddamn. I
wish I broke Eric.
I wish I had more time than exists on the show to be able to sit and chew and then give a well-reasoned response. Which means that I'm probably going to call you after the show with a good answer, which is frustrating. But let's continue this. Let's talk to Erica. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk to someone in Australia who's got a question about what's going on in the United States. Erica, you're live on the show.
Yeah, hello, Eric. How are you?
Hey, what time is it over there?
You know what? I'm an Australian, but at the moment I'm actually holidaying in France. So,
Okay.
But I'm only here for another week, so I'm heading home soon. But still Australian. So,
honestly, that means it's
with
less.
an Australian perspective.
and if you're calling from France and not Australia, that means it's less expensive for me. So,
Yeah, it's also a much better time.
Yeah, it's probably early evening over there.
Yeah, rather than sort of 4 a.m, it's 8:00 at night. So that's good.
Well, I'm glad that you called in. What's on your mind? What's going on?
Oh my goodness! You know, I've been on hold for a long time, and I've been listening to you guys talk about so much. And can I quickly just give you a definition of what I think propaganda is,
Yeah, of course.
and then we can move. I actually think it's propaganda actually means pro-agenda. So if you're actually talking about something that's promoting your agenda, you are delivering propaganda. I think that propaganda probably got a bad name when it was used during wartime, because propaganda was used to, to promote negative or positive aspects of war, and so I think that it kind of got a bad inclination then. But that's what I think propaganda is. I just think it's promotion of an agenda, and I think that probably the definition in many dictionaries needs to be updated, because promotion of an agenda is also advertising, like you say.
So I
that's what I think about propaganda. I think it's got a bad name from wartime and from people promoting bad ideals like transgenderism, or not transgender, anti-transgenderism, because I have a transgender son, or anti-gay feelings, and all that kind of negativity that comes into advertising those negative things in society. I think that's where propaganda got it. Sort of negative connotations.
So I have a statement and then a couple questions.
Sure.
So the first is I only know this because my partner has been reading about this specifically the last couple of months, but propaganda as a term is not that old, and it really kind of has its foundational roots in pointing out that wartime governmental type thing, and so viewing propaganda as kind of something that created that became negative, it feels like it's kind of the other way around, that it started off as negative and is shifting to kind of a more holistic view. But either way, chicken and egg. Your statement.
No, I'll take that on board. No, I'm happy to be informed about that.
I believe that's it. But the rest of your statement, let me try and recall. I apologize. Could you restate for me?
Oh, which part?
Thank you.
Remember.
Oh, yeah. So that's okay. We can talk about propaganda. You wanted to talk about Iran.
Oh yeah, I suppose I was just trying to think about. Oh look, you have wonderful call screeners, by the way, and I was having a wonderful discussion with the lovely ladies I was talking to, and I just don't get what message is coming from America at the moment. Like us in Australia, me and my friends, and we've all got investments and shares, and we're looking at stock exchanges and looking at what's happening in Iran. That was so fast, and there was no messaging, and there was no propaganda. It was like, it just, will I, won't I, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what I'm going to do. It's just this lack of messaging from what you guys are doing that's forming what happens in the rest of the world. And we're absolutely like shaking in our boots going, what the hell is America doing? Where is the messaging? What are they saying? Everything's contradictory. And I suppose what my whole thing was like, this whole thing about your message about what propaganda is, it's like, do you guys know how to use it? Like, can you please tell us what you guys are doing? Because we don't know. We don't know what the hell you're doing. I don't think I can express that any.
No, it's very clear. I'm actually really interested in what Atticus would say. If you were to explain to an Australian what the hell's going on.
What the hell is going on? Yeah, please.
I would say that what is going on is that you have two political parties in power, one of whom is very united in a goal, and that goal is whatever the leader of that party wants, essentially, or can be convinced of. That's a very important caveat. The other party is set in their confidence and in their loyalty to the way that things are, the way that things have worked, and thinks that the way that things have been done for the last 2, 3, 4 decades is the way to proceed. It's been called regular order, is how a lot of the folks in the Democratic Party have been wanting to return to. And so within that coalition, you have half of the Democratic Party, which is ready for something new. They want to use a particular a populist set of policies. That's stuff like tuition-free college, single payer as an option or as a buy-in, stuff like a higher living wage, more transit, more green tech, that type of stuff. And then the other half is very corporate heavy, very institution heavy, very power loyal. And so that there's infighting in one side, and the other side is very united in engaging forward. And so because of that, there are those three factions fighting for power. That's kind of what's happening and what the result of.
Can I express how I see that quite differently, if that's all right? What we see in our media, and I do watch a lot of American television, not a lot of Fox, but a lot of more learned media sources, and also what we have in Australia is that the Republican Party is actually quite divided into those people that are staunch towards towards Trump, and those that are too scared to stand up to him, but in the background don't like what he's doing, and then the Democrats that look at what he's doing and go, shit, he's acting against the Constitution in all these ways, and we feel, what can we do? Because even the Supreme Court won't even listen to their ruling. So, and I don't know if they feel powerless or if they are powerless. I don't know what your courts are doing. If this happened anywhere else in the world, if this happened in Australia, we would just be kicking out our government. It just wouldn't happen. Oh, it's just incredible what's happening over there, and I think that I don't know if I'm necessarily an informed foreign person. I don't know how much of your population knows what's going on, but it's bizarre, and that's how I see the Democratic Party and the Republican Party so different. They have a cult leader. Some of them are completely obsessed with and will bow down to and kiss whatever ring he puts in front of them.
Yep.
The rest are too scared to lose their power because they think that.
Well, because they do.
That
everyone.
That's what they think that's their job. Their job is to serve the American people, not to serve themselves.
So.
And the Democrat, what sort of position do you think the Democrats are in, and what can they do from here to stop this rampant, erosion of democracy, and this free fall into dictatorship that you guys seem to be having, that is affecting my welfare. In Australia, we find our stock exchanges going down every time yours goes down. We are being affected by what happens in you, and now you guys are into this Iraq war. I mean, my God, this is just insane.
Atticus, what are your thoughts? And then I'll respond, because I don't want to bias the conversation.
I did not get a good 70% of that.
Oh,
sorry.
No.
Was I speaking too much Australian?
No. You're good. I might not be sending enough audio to Atticus on my end.
Oh, okay.
Let me try and bump this up and see if that changes things. Okay, go ahead. You were saying at the end there, it feels like the Republican Party has this, they're lining up to kiss the ring, do whatever it takes to stay in power, and that those who don't agree are just staying really quiet and out of the way because they're afraid they're going to lose their spot right? That you think that their job is to serve the American people and not to serve Donald Trump. And so your question is, what can the Democratic Party do to turn this fucking ship around? Because you, as an Australian, every time our economy drops, your economy drops. And every time we do something, the ripples are being felt in a way that probably makes you feel very powerless, because you don't know why things are happening this way, and it doesn't feel like anybody's doing anything about it. And so your best hope is the opposing party, the Democrats. And so what are they going to fucking do, and what can they do?
So let me
because there's no explanation that's even coming from America about why you're doing what you're doing. So we can't plan ahead.
So Erica said there's not an explanation about why what we're doing. So they just don't even have a spot to go from. Okay, so Atticus, what are your thoughts?
So it's not that the Republican Party is scared of Donald Trump. It's that they are scared of his voters. These voters are enthusiastic out the wazoo, and it's turned. So the Republican Party used to be a midterm party, and what I mean by that is every 4 years we have our general election, which is 2024, 2020, 2016, etc. The midterms are between the generals, so 2022, 2018, they're offset. The Republicans used to perform really well in midterms and not super great in the generals, because all of everybody who would come out for the general would be liberals or Democrats or independents leaning left. So that has since switched. Donald Trump's core base is not a very responsive party in midterms. That's why you see Democrats making huge gains in off-year elections, huge gains in local or special elections, to the point where in Donald Trump's first term, the Democrats had their best midterm showing since Watergate in the 70s. And then in Joe Biden's first his only midterm election, we lost a handful, maybe 5 to 10 congressional seats, which is unheard of in terms of its power presentation. The party in power never.
Yes, I did pay attention. I did pay attention to that. It was very good to see.
Yeah, so we switched. The Democrats do well in off years, and we cannot compete in the general because of Trump's base, because his coalition is so unique. But my theory of the case is that his coalition only exists with him. Once he is no longer able to run, there's no Trump coronation coming. Like you're not going to see JD Vance carry the MAGA label. You'll see some sycophants stick with him, but the Republican Party as a whole is not going to stick with JD Vance. They're also not going to stick with the Mitt Romney types. Once Trump is gone, they have a massive power vacuum problem, and nobody really knows what's going to happen once he's not on the ballot, because you see people talking about JD Vance taking up the mantle and other people scoffing at that. Also within the MAGA universe, some people really, really want him to, and others are viscerally against him. So we don't really know what's going to happen. The issue is just that his voters are a political force to be reckoned with, and the Democrats have not done the work to engage with them on their own turf, which is directly, honestly, getting rid of politics as usual, because these new voters do not want politics as usual. They have been screwed over by the system, and Democrats have reaped massive rewards from the system, and so they don't want to change it. At least those in power. I should speak. This is largely broadly. This is not a set theory of the case. This is my observations as someone who identifies as a political scientist, because it's what I've been focused on the last 10 years of my life. And I say identifies as because I don't have a degree in it, even though that is what my degree is, and I am eventually going to get my degree. It's just
let's be clear. Political scientist is not your gender, so people who want to take that out of context, fuck off.
My pronouns are poli-sci.
I suppose in my ignorance, what would it take to get rid of the electoral college? Because that just seems like a hiding to Republican rule.
Yeah, civil war.
What was the question about the Electoral College?
What would it take to get rid of the Electoral College?
A constitutional amendment, or there is one back way that is being talked about. It's called the National Interstate Vote Compact. Basically what that means is it's a compact that each state signs on to, and the compact states that this state, will give our electoral votes to the winner of the national popular vote if and only if that there are enough other states that also agree to this. So there's, I think, 208, 203 total like electoral votes that have been signed up for this. California's one of them. I think Oregon's one of them. Washington's one of them. There's a couple other Midwest states. But basically, we can get rid of the Electoral College because states get to decide how they apportion their electoral votes on their own. The federal government has no say in that. So if there's enough states that go, yeah, we're going to give it to the national popular vote winner, they can just, all of them, regardless of who won their state, give their electoral votes to the winner of the popular vote. So once 270 electoral votes worth of states have signed on to that, that will be activated, and that's how that can be circumvented. However, other than that, it's a constitutional amendment, and it's basically impossible at this point to get one of those passed because of such high bars that you need to do it.
Yeah, I'm a bit.
Gee, you really burst my balloon there.
If Atticus burst your balloon, I'm going to make this so much worse. I'm more of a doomer, it's going to get worse if you hear my opinion.
You go for it, Eric.
Okay, so I think that Atticus, what the point of, people in power are going to maintain the systems that keep them in power,
right?
Which is why gerrymandering. Do you have gerrymandering in Australia? Do you know what I mean when I say gerrymandering, Erica?
Well, we don't have it, but I know what it is. Yes.
Okay. Why hasn't it been fixed? That seems like a pretty obvious thing.
Because it works for the people in power.
That's right. I think
So I have a hot take about this. I think Democrats should absolutely gerrymander the fuck out of every election that they can possibly get their hands on. Because why the hell would we unilaterally disarm ourselves? I say I'm a Democratic Precinct Committee person in Oregon. Full disclosure, I am a part of the party because they're the only opposition party that has any sort of sway, not because I actually agree with the platform. It's where you pick your voters, and I think that why would we unilaterally disarm ourselves in this kind of fight to get as many seats in power as possible when the Republicans sure as hell aren't going to do that?
Right. So which is why...
Who's going to be the personality that drives that forward, though? Because you've got some beautiful, wonderful personalities in the Democratic Republic, but none of them seem to be like stepping really forward of anyone else.
No, because just to kind of put my own spin out there, we are overtime. Atticus, are you okay going overtime a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me try and back up just a little bit. So here's my view, and it's just my opinion. Y'all talked about the Democratic Party, you talked about the Republican Party, and where we're going. So I guess I'll start with the Democratic Party. I think that the Democratic Party has made a really, really toxic shift, and it's happened in the last 20 years. And I think that it is incredibly performative, and I think that it's our own fault. Democrats have revised history, I think, to portray big changes in society as the result of bipartisan collaboration. And so we look at civil rights and we go, it's through bipartisan collaboration that we changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
I've never gotten that. I think it's interesting because I haven't received that type of messaging at all. I keep going. I want to learn more.
Sure. So I think that it is through the people joining hands and putting things aside. It is through, pushing through until we can all be on the same page. That gets us there. I think that you see that exemplified in shows like The West Wing.
Okay.
And I think that Democrats, when I say rain dance, do you know what I mean? It's probably very culturally insensitive, so maybe you could give me a better way to say this. Mm-hmm. But I think that Democrats are trying to perform bipartisan collaboration in the hopes that they will magically bring back whatever it is that makes things work again. I think it is a hopeful illusion that Democrats have held on to everyone's detriment. They are no longer interested in getting things done. They are more interested in performing bipartisan collaboration in order to hope that everything can go back to the way that they perceive that they were, not recognizing that it was never that way in the first place.
I think that's a decent theory of the case, and the most prime example that I can think of is the fight for the ACA in 2009, 2010, because there were a lot of Democrats who refused to sign on to that bill unless they could get a Republican vote to say that it was bipartisan, because they had supermajorities and could pass whatever they wanted at that point.
The thing that pops into my mind right away is the January 6th committee.
Yep.
Right. And so I think there are a lot of examples like that bring that to the front. I think that
that's really interesting, Eric, because I think that's the way that Australian politics had been for a long time, and then in this previous election we had, Dutton came out very Trumpish and lost.
So I think that in the face of that, there are other problems, and those other problems aren't waiting for us to get our shit together. I think that the idea that we are a democratic republic or whatever the case is ridiculous. I think we're closer to an oligarchy than we are to a democracy at this point. We have, over the last 30 years, dismantled those safeguards that prevent the United States from falling into tyranny and oligarchy. Things like limiting expenditures on political campaigns, right? Every politician on the left and the right court big businesses in order to fund their election campaigns. And they do it all the time. There's never a time when they're not doing it. They are beholden to their financial backers, which means that our government itself is beholden to the people that they're supposed to regulate, and they are not, which is screwing over normal people. And so you have people who see that the middle class is dying, that people are not able to afford things. The dollar is not worth anywhere near as much anymore. And they go, something is wrong. And then they're looking for what is causing this problem. Something is wrong. We have generations now who are never going to be able to own a home, right? This idea of the American dream of having your slice of, your own world is gone for a lot of people. People who went to college to get massive degrees, took on tons of student debt, and were told, if you do that, you're going to be able to live, this American dream, buy a home, have a family. And the fact is that's not the case for a lot of people who are now disillusioned. And so on the left, you have a lot of college graduates, but even for people who aren't college graduates, right, you're seeing, hey, the system appears to not be working the way it's supposed to. So what is causing it? And I think that the Republican side, the MAGA side, they're seeing something is wrong, and they're pinpointing it and going, we think that it is conspiracy on the left.
Or immigrants or trans people.
And I think that on my side of it, I view it and go, this is a capitalist oligarchy.
Yeah,
that is
the case is also that it's
that's the most simple. That's like Occam's razor. That's the most simple explanation. Really,
it appears that way. But whether I'm right or they're right, the fact is that you have two groups of people who see that there is something deeply, deeply wrong in the system, and they are fighting for what they think is going to solve that problem. Now,
do you honestly think that Republicans are actually fighting for like an ideal?
Yes, absolutely.
Or are they following one man's ideal?
No,
I don't even know what he's actually. I don't know what they're actually aiming for.
So I can let me turn down your volume just a bit. So there is a lot of it is idealism. So it's couched in a kind of protecting Western ideals in society, and part of that is couched in really old racist kind of views of the world, right? And this kind of historical revisionism, right? But make America great again is because they are alluding to this idealized version of the world that they're trying to get to, and they view trans people as breaking down their definitions of what people should be. They view, social institutions that are going to help people, right? Different socialist policies as breaking down and getting further and further away from their ideals. I think Donald Trump is absolutely doing everything he can in service to an ideological war, for sure. I think they're all about that. I think both sides are about that. They just have different definitions of what the problem is.
I'm not sure in what decade they're supposed to be looking at. I mean,
well, and the thing is that
again, from what? Like, when was it great?
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think, though, for me, be it Democrat, be it Republican, we can argue about, what's at the top of the headlines, but ultimately I don't think things are going to get better, because the problem is what our country is currently beholden to, which is money. It's big business. And every side that is running is playing that game.
Okay, so Eric and Atticus, you look at your little, future balls. What do you see happening to America in the next 10, 20 years? I mean, where do you guys go? Where do you think? Because you're supposed to be the biggest and best and most powerful, most richest in the world, and we're supposed to follow you. Where are you leading us? Like,
so here's my hypothesis. I don't. So we're only 6 months into this presidency. We have exactly 10 more of those. 5 more. I'm bad at math. There's 7. There's 7 more sets of 6 months to go before Trump is out of office. 7. I got there. The numbers appeared. This isn't sustainable. His administration is not sustainable for the long term. So we're going to lose allies. We're going to lose global standing. People are not going to be able to rely on us, and because of that, different alliances are going to be made. We're at a point in the geopolitical world where it's going to need to be reshaped without us, because we cannot be depended upon to stay in a nuclear treaty that we signed on to, that he pulled us out of in 2016. We cannot be trusted to be there for our allies economically or socially, or just even for the terms of standing side by side. Those aren't things that we're able to be counted on now. So I think we're going to see a really big shift in the geopolitical structure. Who fills that power vacuum? Very big if the leading competitors are the EU or China. I think both of those have very big claims for global leadership. As for what happens at home, the one thing has to break, or everything is kind of off the rails. The Democrats have to break their reliance on the old world order. They have to focus on populist issues. People are angry. People are suffering. We need to build housing. We need to build density. We need to stop subsidizing the suburbs, because people work together better when they are around other people who are different. That's why cities are so much more liberal than the suburbs, because we are around people who are different than us all the time. So you have to learn how to be around each other. So Democrats need to bend before they break, and I don't know what that looks like. I know those things are going to have to happen. I just don't know what shape they take.
For me,
no, you guys are looking at reviewing AUKUS, which is a big thing that is costing us $10 billion. But sorry, Eric, I interrupted you.
No, I wanted you to be able to respond. That's important. I was going down a bit of a different rabbit hole while you both were talking. I apologize.
No.
I think that at home you have a population that is split in a very, very scary way. Half of this population thinks that we're at war with ourselves, with each other already, and have for a long time. I do believe that ideological set on the right has been at war for a long time. Looking up statistics with the Anti-Defamation League, out of domestic extremist-related killings in the United States from 2008 to 2017, 71% were committed by right-wing extremists.
God, you guys and your guns. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
wow.
So I do think that there is a large group of people who feel that they are at war, and their opposition does not. And that means that it's going to continue to be like this until something changes.
Yeah.
What do you think that change is going to be, Eric? I mean,
well, I think that optimistically, there's a huge power structure, like Atticus said, that is built up around Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not immortal. Even if he became a fascistic dictator and stopped, all elections from here until the day that he died, homie's in his 80s. Like, there is a limited amount of time for that person to live naturally. So that said, I do agree with Atticus's view that,
God.
right?
I'm going to say thank God.
Like Atticus's view that catalyst around that structure, if that goes away, I think that may have a chilling effect that can bring people closer to the center, which is an optimistic view. Another view, which I'm seeing that is growing, is people on the left going, oh, we're at war. Okay. Which would lead to a rapid escalation, because it's one thing when one side is getting beat up, but when it's both sides, you know how it is. When you're in school and a kid hits you, they don't get in trouble, but you hit them back, and you're the one getting detention.
Yep.
And I think that
because you responded in kind. Yeah.
Right. I think that Democrats have been working very, very hard and patting themselves on the back really hard for being the better person. And you know what? That's the only thing they're getting is the ability to go to bed at night feeling like they're the better person, because all of their rights are getting taken away. So
I'm not the better person.
I know.
I have something. I know. I have to.
So and therein, Erica is an example of that, right? How people are.
Do you think there's going to be a Republican backlash from Trump attacking Iran, though?
I think
there will be, but it will be brief and quiet.
Yeah.
So the Republicans who are like, oh, the people are on against this war, they're going to say, I was against this war. This is not the right thing to do. And then Trump's coalition will hear his reasoning for it and go, oh, the leader has spoken. We have to go to war with Iran. And then because people are scared of his voters, not him, they will go, we should go to war with Iran. I guess we're going to war with Iran. You're so right. We should. So you're going to hear a brief backlash.
There'll be something else that he gets you into, and they'll just go, "Oh shit, look at that!"
Yep.
You're going to hear a brief backlash, and then you're going to hear everybody get on board the bandwagon. That's what's going to happen.
And then, like you said, Erica, look, a distraction.
Focus. Oh.
Yeah. So the best that we can do, and that I'm hearing from people who are better than me, is we need to focus on our neighbors. We need to focus on building our communities, and we need to make sure that we are building the infrastructure to get through this. If we're not expecting somebody to come and save us, then we need to save ourselves. And that doesn't necessarily need to be anything drastic. It can mean if there is no social aid coming to your area, then making sure that you are creating networks to be able to care for each other is needed. And whether or not we actually need to pull that lever, creating those communities is beneficial regardless. So that is the hope right now. And that's what we're holding on to, which is very inwardly focused. You're seeing things on the out. Well, you might love that, but you don't love that for you because.
No, I love the way that you always bring it back to your community. I actually just was joking with my husband today that I thought that maybe Trump bombed Iran because he wanted Russia to help Iran, and that way he would be weakened and Ukraine would have to do a peace deal there. But I was like spitballing, and he was like, no, don't be ridiculous.
Right now we are focusing on getting through things on our end, which unfortunately is freeing up larger things happening that are affecting you. Mm-hmm. We are distracted, we are scattered, we are upset, we are afraid. And it's on every side. It's not just Democrats. Republicans are too. And they're lashing out, and everybody's lashing out at what they think the problem is. And that's why there's not a lot of cohesion. And that has led to the rise of fascism. And so.
Yep. You're right. I think it's really hard to focus when there's so many things going on. It's hard to really focus on fixing one problem when there's just like, I think it was, I don't know, Ray Bannett, I don't know who it was, some American guy that said, just machine gun the problems, and they'll have too many things to deal with, and then
Steve Bannon.
they won't know what to focus on.
Yeah, and that is also Project 2025, and that's happening. But we are 20 minutes over time.
You've been lovely. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Atticus, is there anything else you wanted to throw in before we moved on?
Sure. Just a reminder to anybody who is watching: creating channels of community does not mean going out to the corner and giving out meals of your bought with your hard-earned money. It can be as simple as hosting a game night, having friends over to have a potluck.
Damn straight.
Just discussing, are you okay? How can I help? Those things are the bedrock of resistance. They are the bedrock of democracy. So if you're active resistance, all you can manage is to have a friend over, watch a movie, and take your mind off of things, do that. And don't stop doing that.
Damn straight. Erica, take care of yourself. And I look forward to being on the other side of this with you, making a better world. We just need to get there.
Thank you so much, Erica and Atticus. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Take care. All right, so I know that people are moving on to watching other shows. It's about that time. Atticus, we ran over time, but I'm just enjoying our conversations. I do want to say that if people like the show and they want to support it, it is your support that actually makes this happen. We have had people from the UK and Australia who were waiting on the line for 45 minutes at least each. We got to pay for that. If you want to help us, consider going to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. Every little bit helps. It makes sure that we can keep this going from episode to episode. If you want your comment, if you have something to say and you want your comment read live on air, you can leave a super chat, just like the people who left super chats today. My Unfinished Journey sent $2.22. Thank you. It says, hail Eric and Atticus, and hail propaganda for good. Nice. John Klein sent $10. Thank you, John. It says, thinking of you and your family and sending you hugs. Thanks for being there for us all. Thank you. Sincerely appreciate it. And my grandpa's Danny Morones, and he was one of the best people I've known, and I hope to be remembered as well as he is. Atlas Dye sent $10 and says, great topic today. I've been chewing on what propaganda is for a bit recently. Thank you. Love you both. Oh, thank you, Atlas. And CG Dancer sent $10. Thank you. And says, I'm way late, but I just watched The Hunger Games this week, which has me thinking a lot about propaganda. I know, right? We are living in the Hunger Games. And what is political? What is the lived experience and how those intersect? Thanks for the topic today. Thank you. We are going to continue the conversation. We're going to be hopping into Discord. And if you want to join us, the link is in the description for this video. So you should come and say hi and just hang out for a little bit. I have been in the process of grieving. I have been in just a weird headspace. I'm going to hang out for a while, but I'm going to do my best, but we are going to head over there. I know that we're past time. Thank you so much to our amazing volunteers. There's no way that we can make this happen without you. And yeah, Atticus, is that everything? I think that's everything.
I think that's everything.
Oh, Jesus fuck, Blaine. I think we just got the biggest donation on via Super Chat the show's ever gotten. Blaine just sent $99. Thank you, Blaine.
Thank you, Blaine.
That is about an episode and a half of call screening cost. Sincerely, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Yay. Blaine says, love you guys. Love you too, Blaine. Thank you. All right, y'all. We are going to be picking up again next week. Welcome to the regular spot on the show, Atticus. I'm so glad that you're here.
It is a pleasure to have a regular spot and share a conversation with you every 3 weeks.
I know, right? And unfortunately, we are definitely picking this up later, and not everyone's going to get to hear our conclusions, but I just love hanging out with you. All right, everybody. I'm Eric Murphy.
And I'm Atticus Van Paris.
This is Skeptic.
And I'm glad we had... Oh, sorry. I messed it up again!
I love it. May it never be done right. This is Skeptic Generation.
And I'm glad we had this conversation.
Perfect.
Talk.